Welcome back. From discussions pertaining to peace, perhaps a need for us to move on in terms of whether there is a deliberate strategy to get people to focus more on the ICC and to forget the important things of implementing the constitution, creating institutions that will help us move forward in as far as economic or social political structures in this country. Are we more focused on what's happening to the Campus 6, so much so we're forgetting about what's happening in 2012? I need for us in terms of making sure we get the leaders who will not repeat the atrocities we've witnessed from independence. Our guest this morning to help us understand the situation, whether that's where we're headed to, is Tony Gashoka, who's not new to television. It's good to see you, my brother.
Sasa Jimmy?
You've been, can one say you've been quiet, Tony?
Well, there is a time...
you were in government. How was that?
Well, going into government was an interesting experience. You know, the Grand Coalition came right after a very tumultuous period in Kenya's history. But there was a lack of synergy between the two halves of government.
Right.
I think this has now
played out. Continuous, yes.
I think I was the first to resign. And since then, there's been a number
of
resignations or people who are not happy with how the coalition is working. I think there are some revelations as well in the WikiLeaks. I think they quoted James Orengo.
Yes, twice actually.
As saying that the Prime Minister's office wasn't working as it should have been working. But I've chosen to remain silent about this because, you know, when you work for somebody, I think there is some integrity that you must retain.
Well done.
And what happened between Prime Minister Odinga and myself remains private.
Well done.
For the purposes that I worked there.
Can I ask, though, in terms of the reason why, you know, that office perhaps wasn't working very well, or perhaps in the bigger picture, the Grand Coalition, is it because it's really a new system and you still have two parties with dissenting views whatsoever in terms of where to lead this country? Is that the focal problem? In as far as that, or is this basically a total disregard of how government systems work? And you basically
I think there were two problems. One is what you say, but there's another fundamental one, which was the constitutional mandate of the Prime Minister was to coordinate and supervise the affairs of government. And in that capacity, one would have expected that he's assimilated into the working government bureaucracy and becomes a prefect in chief, more or less doing what Ambassador Mudaura does and reporting or consulting with the president.
Right.
But I think the handlers at the Prime Minister's office try to create a parallel bureaucratic system, having an expert in infrastructure, and an expert in law, an expert in whatever, paralleling what the other government was doing. So you had a problem, let's say in the Mao Forest.
Yes.
You had the Ministry of Forestry, the Ministry of Environment, trying to do their work. But then you have a task force, you know, set up by the office of the Prime Minister under Noor, doing the same thing.
I see.
So the conflict would be now who would be doing what. So the Prime Minister was in conflict as to whether he's a supervisor and coordinator of government or an implementer of government policy.
I see.
And I think a lot needs to be thought through. In other countries like Tanzania and others, where the Premier is a working function of the system, then they work in synergy with the president and the apparatus, as opposed to having an independent office to do so.
Makes a lot of sense. You heard my question. I'm a little concerned in terms of us focusing a lot more on the ICC, and it's an important process. A majority of Kenyans are saying yes. You know, we still have a very weak judicial system, so we're seeing the expeditious move that the ICC has done its work, and we're happy. So let's move on. But we need to focus on 2012 in terms of making sure that, you know, we have the right leaders in place and not just being shocked by an election. Or am I being naive in terms of the importance of the ICC for a better Kenya?
That's a good question. But Jimmy, incidentally, a lot of Kenyans don't know that the ICC is very young. The ICC is only as old as 2002.
Yes.
Has handled the case of DRC Congo, Chad, the issue of Sudan. Kenya is now number 4. And with Libya, it's going to be number 5. This is a young court.
Right.
In fact, prosecutor Ocampo, term as prosecutor, expires later this year.
Just for the benefit of those who may know, Rwanda's issue was handled by who?
By the Hague, the Arusha, what basically, not the Hague, Arusha, there was a special tribunal that was set up with a special prosecutor, special judges, but dociled at Arusha.
I see.
In fact, for my own view, Kenya's best solution in the future would be to invite the United Nations to appoint an independent prosecutor, appoint judges from among other areas like the Commonwealth, and be able to actually have a proper tribunal in Kenya. but being run by independent people.
And
those the judges from the Commonwealth can include judges from Kenya. The whole idea of a tribunal is impartiality and independence.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with it being nearer home. People feel the justice, people can access, people can visit the tribunal, people can give information. So it makes a lot of sense to have a local tribunal as long as it's independent. But Jimmy, my worry is that we need to look at Kenya in a macro sense, in a historical sense.
Right.
Let's start in 1963, when Kenya won her independence. Colonial Britain came and colonized Kenya, caused havoc. There was what amounts to a civil war between the Mau Mau and the British and so on. Up to today, what has been paid by the British government in criminal terms, in civil terms, for impunity? How many lives were lost during the fight for independence? Lands were grabbed in the White Highlands all over Kenya. Impunity was actually perpetuated by imperialism. And today, when we sit down and talk about new impunity, and the British are shouting at the top of their voice that Kenyans need to be punished, I ask the question, whoever punished the British for colonizing Africa, and the Germans and many others? Let us look at impunity.
Can one argue and say, look, there was a process where the British government did offer to, in fact, money was given to the Kenyan government to, to help settle, and to sell land in terms of what they had taken. And that, one can argue, was more or less in terms of their way of giving back what belonged to the Kenyan people. And it is actually this government, or rather the Kenyatta government, who didn't quite follow through in terms of what the British had paid.
In fact, the current status is that I know Paul Mwite is filed a case in London
against
with the Mau Mau veterans, doing the contrary of what you say, demanding compensation and saying that the people or the veterans of the Mau Mau were not compensated. Jimmy, first of all, I don't want to be misunderstood by any Kenyan as trying to say there should be no case at the ICC. I don't want to be misunderstood that there should be no action on impunity. But it's important for Kenyans to be educated about the double standards that are being applied by the world, so that Kenyans can make informed decisions about 2012.
Well done.
I think if you look at, for example, the Gaza Strip, where there has been violence between Israel and the Gaza for years and years, or Israel invasion of Lebanon, you've never had an Israeli prime minister being pulled to the Hague or accused of crimes against humanity. If you look at the American unilateral action of invading Iraq, if you look at the deaths and havoc in Afghanistan, how have those translated to crimes against humanity? The British government was in a 14-year-old war. The national, it was called the Republican Army, was fighting in Northern Ireland. It took George Mitchell and the Good Friday Agreement to bring peace to the British association there in Northern Ireland. I am only saying that if you look at the history, many people have approached peace and reconciliation in different ways. In South Africa, after many years of apartheid, Mandela being jailed for 27 years, they came through truth, justice, and reconciliation, and the country moved forward. So as this country moves to The Hague, I'm concerned about a few things. I'm concerned that after the judges have confirmed the summons, and the people accused have confirmed that they are going to The Hague, I find it very, very strange that instead of the prosecutor communicating to the accused persons through the legal channel of writing to them, of expecting them to appear before the court, and therefore the trial beginning, we are having another spate of publicity, interviews.
Are you saying it's already a judicial process? Has it already started? Or?
Well, nobody is helping. Alfred Mutua is not helping by making statements on behalf of the government.
Why is supposed to happen?
He's not an accused person.
The papers are saying that the charges have been given. Summons have been given to the accused by, I think, Kingori, we saw on television.
I don't remember seeing Alfred Mutua summoned by the Hague, and I don't remember him being a lawyer. So it's very strange when you're really answering serious matters.
What should happen? What's the process? What's going to happen with
I think right now, every party who is before the Hague has a lawyer or has counsel.
Right.
And the judges, in their wisdom, in a majority decision of 2-1, found that April 7th, summons to appear have been given to the Ocampo 6. And at that time, the process will kickstart. And I want to tell you, Jimmy, this is a very specific legal issue. It is not a political issue. It is not a character debate. You cannot go there and say, Jimmy Gadu is a Christian. He's a good man. Jimmy Gadu goes to church. He did not commit rape. Jimmy Gadu is a good man because over the last 10 years, he has built 10 churches. That is not what the charges are before the Ocampo sits.
Right.
There are specific charges. On this particular day, in Naivasha, on this place, so many people were killed. And they were killed by these people at this time by these orders. Now, if you are accused of that specific crime, the only thing you can do is disprove through evidence that incident. And that's all the court will be interested in. The court will not be interested in all these side shows that Alfred Mutua said or did not say, the editorial, or Jimmy Gadu or Powerbreakfast had Tony Gashoka. It will not matter. What will matter? Was there a crime? Was there no crime? Have you satisfied the judges that the crime was not committed?
I see what you mean.
And so forth.
What will happen on the 7th, when they do go for the first time to The Hague? Does the process then begin immediately in terms of a case? Or is it still nothing has been confirmed, will be confirmed after hearing something else from the accused? What's the process?
No, the case began when the court ruled that summons be issued.
Yes.
And as you've seen, the Honorable the Attorney General has instructed the police commissioner, who has gone ahead and served upon the Ocampo 6 summons to appear.
Right.
And all of them have agreed publicly that they are appearing. Now, when they go before the pre-trial chamber, there shall be a process of now the formal part of why they have been summoned and so forth. And then they will have access soon after to all the evidence that Ocampo had given to the judges so that they can be able to challenge or test that evidence.
I see.
They will also have, within the month, a period to actually introduce their own evidence and be able to bring clarification or inquire anything about the other evidence that they see. It's upon that process that the court will confirm or not confirm summons based on what they find out at that point. And remember, by that time, there is no indictment. At that point, you're just saying, have you been properly summoned? Is the evidence before the judges correct? They will have an opportunity to challenge that evidence and bring new evidence as well.
So key thing is indictment hasn't happened.
Indictment is long away, and in fact, I don't see indictments anywhere before November or December of this year.
Yes.
There is still that process you see, Ocampo has gone to the court ex parte. In fact, I was talking to two lawyers who said that, look, even what the judges have ruled against Ocampo is interesting because they have ruled against Ocampo without the benefit of other counsel. It is Ocampo who went to the judges ex parte, and therefore what has been ruled for and against is actually entirely based on his side of the story. The other accused persons have yet to give their side of the story to the judge.
So they could throw this case.